This drive-in theater is radioactive. Now you can hear tonight's show on your AM car radio. Turn your ignition key to the accessory position. This will not drain your car battery. Now turn on your radio and zero in on the following AM station.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
That is actually starting. I didn't see it until this morning, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I saw it this morning. I saw it this morning as well.
Yeah.
So we in?
Indeed. I think we are in. Welcome, everybody.
Let's go. Welcome.
This is going to be a special episode for Jim.
Yes, it is. Aren't they all, though?
Are they? There's got to be a clunker or two in there. Well, should we talk about what we're going to talk about and then get into the news?
What are we going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about?
We are going to talk about David Bowie today, but not at the same time, which is the conundrum of these two movies that we are. So I think it's very apropos. So we are dealing with two movies based on David Bowie, one literally and the other more figuratively by necessity. Stardust, which is a brand new biopic that's been released just in the past couple of weeks here on demand. And then secondly, what's becoming a cult classic as the years go by, Velvet Goldmine. But still kind of an unsung movie. It's not widely available at the moment. I know we had a little bit of an issue.
I was going to say we found that out. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I have the Blu-ray from when it was released, but that's no longer in print, I think. So hopefully you've seen it out there, but there are a few options if you haven't. So you might be interested enough to go seek it out. So that's what we're doing today. It's a Bowie-based episode, and it's near and dear to me because I am a huge David Bowie fan. And I thought that since Stardust is a new flick, and we try to review new things as much as we can, perfect opportunity to bring up another one of my favorites, which is Velvet Goldmine. So that's what we're doing today.
And I thought they were well paired.
Yeah. So if you watched through one, you kind of had enough of a background to sort of know what was going on in the other. And
maybe.
One of them is very linear and the other not so much. So, but we'll talk about it.
Well, before we do that, let's get into some news. Unfortunately, we woke up this morning to devastating news that we have lost yet another star to the Force. David Prowse, Darth Vader, 85, dead. I know that he was ill. He had stopped doing touring quite a while ago. So it's unfortunate because we're losing him fast.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, time continues to move forward.
Yeah, basically.
True. Although, 85, long life. And, he was a much loved individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I met him once in 98. Very nice, very pleasant gentleman. So sorry to hear that. Now we're going to move into the streaming wars. This is interesting. We just cried last week about Wonder Woman 84 jumping over to HBO Max. Mm-hmm. Apparently Godzilla versus Kong. Netflix has offered up a staggering $200 million to gobble this thing up, and Warner Brothers says, hold on a minute. So it looks like they may very well throw this on HBO Max as well.
Right. So from what I understand, the offer was made to Legendary, which is the company that's producing this movie. Right. But Warner Brothers is the studio that's releasing it. And as you said, they said, hold on, we've got our own little cottage industry going here with HBO Max. Yeah. We dump all the DC stuff here and hope people are going to subscribe. Why don't we do the same thing with Godzilla? Now, this is not set in stone yet. This is
no, there's still a theatrical release component, but yeah, again, apparently there are theaters still open. How long? Who knows?
I'm not really sure why they're sort of preemptively talking about trying to get this to streaming, because the release date was already moved to next year.
It's May 21st. It's
like
May. Yeah.
like when presumably more theaters would be open, there would be by May hopefully some vaccine distribution and move toward more normalcy. So I'm not really sure why they're like, hey, let's really release this on streaming now. But $200 million is a lot of money. A lot of money.
Yeah. Apparently it was like 75% of the budget.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
And we did talk about that Coming to America that was gobbled up for, I think, 125.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, these streaming services, they're all fighting for content, and if they've got this money to grab these things up, interesting.
Yeah. And speaking of this from Godzilla's perspective, now it does make sense that Netflix get it because they have all those animated Godzilla series. On the other hand, HBO Max has the rights to the Godzilla films. So it would fit into either one of those platforms. If it's going to a platform, this is something that I would eschew. I'm bringing that word in. I don't.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to see this on a streaming.
I don't want to see it on
this.
Streaming.
Hell no.
On a big screen with the soundtrack booming, being surrounded by this movie.
Yeah. You're
going to lose something watching it for the first time on your television set. Yeah, if it's playing in a theater that's anywhere close to me, that's the option I'm going to take.
Right.
Yeah, because if it's on HBO Max, from here on out, if it's on HBO Max, I'm not going to see it. That's it. If you guys are reviewing a movie that's on HBO Max, I will not be able to see it because I don't have HBO Max. And as I said last week, I'm not paying $15 a month for yet another streaming service, and I just hate this.
I get what's happening here, but is this even sustainable? Even if the vaccine is out, people are still reluctant. For whatever reason, the movie theaters become like this dire non-escape room that people are like, you'd never catch me in a movie theater, but I'll go to the grocery store and be shoulder to shoulder with.
What makes even less sense is I'll go to a restaurant and take off my mask and talk and eat without my mask on and be around other people who are talking and eating without their mask on. Whereas in a movie theater, you're sitting quietly with your mask.
Yeah.
Also, that figure you said last week, like 30 odd million HBO Max subscribers, I found an 8 million subscriber figure.
Wow.
Which I think probably more accurately represents the people who are voluntarily picking up HBO Max who don't already have HBO as part of their cable package. Because I thought that number sounded really high. 30 million sounded like a lot. Obviously, these subscriber numbers, they massage them a little bit, I think.
Right. You think? So we'll get off the streaming because the other interesting thing was DreamWorks said, screw this, and they released The Croods 2 in theater, and it made $14 million over the Thanksgiving Day weekend.
In places where theaters are open.
Places where theaters are still open. So people are going to the theaters. This is a family movie being released on Thanksgiving Day weekend. Somebody showed up. So, I mean, that to me bodes well for maybe the theater experience rebounding a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Although it's
out there,
a family film on Thanksgiving weekend.
I know, but
is a different animal than New Mutants or even Tenet. Because that is families are looking for somewhere to take their kids to get out of the house. So it might be a kind of a skewed number if you say
it could be.
You might not expect the same numbers from anything else other.
I don't know. I just keep hearing that people are saying no theaters for me, no thank you, and yet families went. So. All right, we're going to get off this. I got one more little tidbit of news, and then we'll get into our feature. And this is it the Kodo brothers, Killer Clowns from Outer Space?
Okay.
Apparently, there's rumors now of a
Cheeto, the Cheeto brothers.
Cheeto.
We're probably both wrong now that I think about it.
Well, it's Chiodo. Chiodo. Kodo, Chiodo, Cheetos. I like Cheetos because that just makes me hungry. Apparently, a sequel is in discussion right now with MGM and Netflix. So No, he got nothing. They've been talking about it since '88. Maybe it was a slow news cycle and they're like, let's put this out there again. All right. So, anyways, that's all my news I got.
Okay. Hopefully, we've got some Bowie fans for the first time listening to us, maybe enticed by Jeff's lovely artwork with the Stardust and Velvet Goldmine posters paired up. Just a little bit of backstory with my history with Bowie. I became a Bowie fan in 1985. And we've talked about this before, not the fact of me being a fan, but the Live Aid concert of 1985. We talked about it heavily when we did Bohemian Rhapsody, because Queen kind of stole the show. My takeaway from the day was David Bowie. Now, of course, I knew who he was. My first memory of him is watching that show, That's Hollywood, which was a half-an-hour clip show that used to show on Channel 7 here. And I saw the scene of him taking off his human makeup from the man who fell to Earth. And Candy Clark first discovers him as an alien. And the guy terrified me from that point on. Didn't help that he had an album called Scary Monsters come out soon after that, because that cemented it in my head that he was somebody to stay away from. So I always thought of him as an actor, though, more than a musician, because of that clip of the man who fell to Earth. So flash forward years later, of course, now I know who he is. He's Let's Dance and Blue Jean and everything else. And I liked it, but I never had the need to go out and buy one of his albums. But watching Live Aid and seeing his performance that day of Heroes just clicked something in me. And the next week or whatever it was, I went to the record store and I was looking for a greatest hits. I bought one on cassette. I think it was called Fame and Fashion. And I just fell in love with his music. And I listened to that until I wore the tape out. And from there, I bought every single album, probably in the course of 2 or 3 months. I had everything on vinyl because that's all I had really, was a little cassette player and a record player. I just didn't look back after that. And I have been a huge fan since then. We are going to start with Stardust, which is a recently released biopic starring Johnny Flynn. And he is playing Bowie here. He's not playing a composite of different characters like we have in Velvet Goldmine. This is a biopic centered on a time in Bowie's life when he was promoting his Unsung at the Time album, The Man Who Sold the World. Okay, this was his first visit to America, I'm thinking, and it was definitely his first tour, quote unquote, which his record company Mercury and his management somehow didn't get him the right paperwork, and he was unable to play concerts when he came over. So it was more like an interview tour and an informal, he played at parties and private get-togethers, so it wouldn't be official and on the books. And he was chaperoned by the publicist of Mercury Records, Ron Oberman, who was played by Mark Maron here. Great comedian, and I love Mark Maron anyway. If you listen to last week's episode, I was extremely wary of this because they did not get the rights to Bowie's music. Going into it, it's not going to be like a razzle-dazzle Rocket Man or Bohemian Rhapsody, where you're carried along by his songs. And they get close to it. They do use songs that he covered, and it's the best that they can do. My Death, Amsterdam, I Wish You Would by the Yardbirds. And so these songs are very closely tied to Bowie, and I was glad to hear them. I was glad to be given something, but I would have to say the best way to go into a movie is with completely low expectations, or no expectations, I have to admit, in this case. And it actually surprised me. So I liked it better than I thought that I would.
Well, that's good.
Surprises the hell out of me. No, it really does. Because to me, the worst sin that this movie commits is turning the story of one of the greatest musicians of all time, this great, profoundly charismatic artist, into a completely boring, conventional Hollywood biopic.
Well, it is conventional, yes, but I liked it because I think they tried to humanize him. I think that this guy's performance, Johnny Flynn, he was trying to put across that Bowie was sort of an Iceman, that he was kind of a human sponge. And there's a vacuum, I think, around his performance. And I think that is kind of fitting. And it's almost like the vacuum of not having his music in there, all kind of tied together for me. And that's why I enjoyed it.
One of the big scenes in the I had such the opposite response, because all I could think was I can't believe that this guy who I'd never heard of, who played Bowie, is a musician in real life, because he has no charisma, like zero. And it's so offensive to me, because that's the first thing you think of when you think of Bowie, is like, you just think of his
This is kind
magnetism.
of, I mean, to me, they're kind of saying this is Bowie before he was Bowie,
Right. So
Before
I
he
think
formed this personality, because I thought he was very unlikable. I mean, all right, I take that back. I was invested, but I was more invested in the Mark Maron character. I thought he was more interesting, and he drove the narrative.
Yeah,
a little bit
I agree,
longer.
because I think that the Bowie character was meant to be sort of a vacuum, and I think here and in Velvet Goldmine, he's really just something to reflect other people's reactions against.
But isn't that the whole, like, kind of the gist of what glam rock is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, to me, this is this is how people who don't watch Rebels and Clone Wars feel when they watch Mandalorian. Like, I watched it and I got it, but I didn't get it. I didn't, like, I want to call this Driving Miss Bowie, because they spend 3/4 of this movie in the car.
The thing is, so there's this big key scene, right, where they get this interview with Rolling Stone. And during the interview, the character of Bowie on the screen comes across as very, very hesitant, right? Sort of reluctant to define himself and all this stuff. But if you go back, I actually looked up the John Mendelsohn interview from Rolling Stone that was done during this period. I found the full text of the interview. And during the interview, Bowie says, "Should anyone think that these things are merely distractions or gimmicks intended to obscure the music's shortcomings, he mustn't come to my concerts. He must come on my terms or not at all." That is not some shrinking wallflower. That is not somebody who's like hesitant to put himself or his personality out there. That is somebody who's saying very, very clearly, like, I'm staking my ground as an artist and you have to come to me. And it was so much the opposite of what the real Bowie was like, even just in this interview. I'm telling you, I actually spaced out for long periods of this. I thought this was one of the most boring movies I've ever watched.
It doesn't move, this movie, so I'll
No.
give you that. For anybody that's not a Bowie fan, this is not something.
It's hard to wrap your, because I don't have any.
But I appreciated what they were doing and the whole message that's in the beginning of both of these movies, that this is fictionalized.
Yeah, I thought that was
I
pretty
appreciated
funny.
that, because I agree that they were going too far. He was afraid of mental illness, because that is a constant throughout his interviews. They were trying to portray in the movie that this interrupted his life or his career in some way, where he couldn't even respond in interviews like this Rolling Stone one without being preoccupied with the fact that he thought he was going insane. Where in real life, if you do read that interview, like you were just saying, he's really a showman even when he is being interviewed. So I didn't like the fact that the movie took these liberties for the narrative. And the scene that I didn't like was when he goes to the radio station and he's trying to provoke the DJ. By all accounts, a very charming guy to anybody that met him. He would have charmed that guy into playing his records. But again, it's the liberty of the filmmakers. And when I was watching this guy, I think he resembled Bowie enough that I bought it a few times, that he did his homework. But having said that, Maron is convincing anybody that he can that Bowie is going to be the next big thing. And without his music, without that proof, the audience doesn't buy it.
Correct.
Either, you know, you need him playing The Man Who Sold the World acoustically. Even this guy.
So why did they deny them musical rights?
I just don't think that they're on board with selling his story at all.
So you didn't feel that the portrayal, they had to have had access to the script beforehand going in?
Said that he was not given any kind of, he wasn't consulted in any way on the script. And so he did not approve it, and he wouldn't grant the rights to the music. That was what I read. It was that Duncan Jones, specifically David Bowie's son, said that he wasn't given access to the script.
I'm convinced that even if Spielberg himself brought a script and wanted to do like a Rocket Man, they would probably still say no. I just don't feel that the Bowie family has any interest in doing a biopic or a biography or anything to that effect.
Wow.
And I respect them for that.
So, but you got to give the studio respect to say, "Well, screw it, we're going to do it anyways."
Yeah, because you're running the risk of angering Bowie fans,
right?
For one,
and yet somehow
which is
you were
your
swayed,
audience,
which I find interesting. So,
but again, as a Bowie fan,
you were just
I liked what they were trying to do, but I think their biggest misstep was trying to portray the Ziggy Stardust era without using the Ziggy Stardust songs, because you're robbed of any of the impact. The lack of charisma, I think, is no more apparent than during those final scenes, because he's very stiff, awkward, I think, in the Ziggy get up and the clothing and in the persona. I think they should have ended it at the end of the tour. The publicity around this movie is based on Bowie as Ziggy. If you look at the posters,
the name of the movie is Stardust.
Yes,
it literally. If you know what you're in for, then that's what you're expecting.
The other thing I think this movie does really badly, I think that Jenna Malone is a really good actress who deserves a lot better than this like one note harridan who's all, my husband is a great artist who deserves more, and I'm just going to shout in every scene that I'm in.
Yes, she's angry. I can't see why anybody would marry her. And if you know, we'll talk about Toni Collette. Yes, the character of Angie in Stardust is just so irritating, and you cannot wait till she's off the screen. No slight against Jenna Malone, as you were saying, and I've loved her in other films.
There's nothing here for her to work with.
Yeah.
There's just nothing. And it's such a horrible waste. I understand like there has been a certain narrative that's built up around Angela Bowie. But the truth is that every person is complicated, and every relationship is more complicated than it looks from the outside. And I hate to see her cast as sort of this, you know, conniving kind of, you know, all in for the power kind of, I don't know.
It's true. It's true. And she had so much to do with his early success in terms of the people that she knew that she introduced him to, you know, the help with the whole look and talking him into doing things that maybe he wouldn't have done without her guidance. She was integral to the early success of Bowie, and taking her out of it, it would be a completely different story.
You know, there's always this sort of like the bad woman narrative, you know, because she was the first wife, and because they had a very contentious divorce, and because she published that big tell-all when she was finally able to, sort of telling her side of the story. And again, like this sort of narrative builds up almost like the narrative that builds up around Yoko Ono, you know, in the Beatles. And, you know, things are always more complex than they look from the outside. And I just hate to see, again, like I just hate to see Jenna Malone like in this part where she's just like excoriating people all day long, you know, because they're not doing enough for her husband to become a star.
And if you've ever read that book that she wrote, it's not somebody yelling from the mountaintops at how the world has slighted her or how her ex-husband has slighted her. She completely owns up to what a genius he was, and gives a little bit of insight as to her role. Maybe she suggests that she, okay, because of her this happened, or because of her this happened, but it's never that overt. There's a lot of, you know, behind the scenes stories, but it's all done in a very loving way, not a vindictive way. So yeah, I think a lot of people think of her that way, but I don't think that she deserves it.
Yeah, I agree. And I hate that she's portrayed this way in this movie, and, you know, especially as she's basically the only female character, you know.
Yeah.
So it sort of makes Bowie look very, very passive, because she's always shouting and he's always shrinking. I hate the way they use his brother's schizophrenia like as a narrative plot thing. You know, I just think it's really gross. Also, it's sort of implied at the end that, you know, he became Ziggy Stardust because he watched his brother in drama therapy pretend to be someone else to escape his madness, you know, and I was very uncomfortable with that implication.
Yeah, that I've never heard of before. I think that was a creation, although the album that they're centering on here, The Man Who Sold the World, is about insanity and is obviously influenced by his brother. So I think they were attaching themselves to that here, but I don't think that they necessarily needed it as connective tissue. I think the relationship between Marin or Oberman and Bowie, I think, is a high point. This movie should have been at least 30 minutes shorter than it was.
That would have done a lot for my sanity if it had been a half an hour shorter, because I was definitely about 55 minutes in. You know, you do that thing where you tap the screen to see how much longer you have. And
Kiss of death. We sat and we watched it. It was a movie.
Did you watch it before or after?
Watched it before. I watched this,
which is
first.
Probably the better way to do it.
And you see a lot of parallels, and there's lines of dialogue that carry over from one movie to the other. So I'm like, oh, that girl said that in the other movie. Yeah. Obviously, they were Bowie lines. I have no connection to this whatsoever. So yeah, probably 3/4 of it was lost on me.
Yeah, little things like the yellow shoes, which I've seen photos of before, that they tried to, these little accuracies that they tried to stick in there, I appreciated. But yeah, I don't feel the need to watch it again. But again, going into something with absolutely no expectations,
you're pleasantly
kind of helps me. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. So because of that, I think I'm going to give it 3 buckets.
I am astounded. I am. I expected you to hate this with the fiery light.
Expect the unexpected.
It's just when you thought you knew, Jim.
That's the tagline for Velvet Goldmine, I think, on the post.
I'll go 2.5.
1 star for Mark Maron.
Nice. Well deserved, by the way, that 1 star.
No, I mean, he's literally the only thing that's kind of likable.
I did like his character a lot.
And I always like to hear Mark Maron. I love to listen to him. He's working really hard in a script that gives him nothing.
The connective tissue here, besides Bowie, is that in researching Velvet Goldmine, Mark Maron had Todd Haynes on his podcast years ago and interviewed him at length about Velvet Goldmine. So there is a connection. But yes, okay, let's leave Stardust.
Yes, please.
Yes, let's leave it in a wake of its own Stardust.
This is available on video on demand, by the way. Did we not tell everybody?
And it is not. I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was not $19.99. It was, I think, $5.99.
Which may be too much, but still, if you have any interest, if you're a Bowie fan, doesn't know anything.
Yeah,
about
if you're a Bowie fan,
snuck up. I know that we talked about it on an earlier episode, but then all of a sudden, with everything else going on with COVID, it just drops.
Yeah, because when they announced it at first, Bowie biopic, this was in the middle of Bohemian Rhapsody, Rocket Man fervor. So as soon as the news hit on this, you kind of expected it that's what this was going to be.
Nope.
It is not. To see, now, I was saying before how I don't think the family would ever approve, and I don't think I would like to see a Bowie biopic on that level. As much as I'm saying that I didn't hate this, that I think a lot of his appeal lies in his mystery, his enigma. So to try to lay him bare on the screen, I think is a mistake. And I think that is something that our next film does very well, that they do not try to lay him bare, that he remains an enigma, but we'll get into this. Let's go to the concession stand, and we will be right back.
We've all seen these signs hundreds of times, and we know automatically what they mean. Here's a name sign. In this case, it's a sign that means me. And I'm here to introduce you to a brand new sign, one I hope you'll grow to understand. It's the new seal of the Motion Picture Association. This seal is part of the self-regulation of the Motion Picture Association. It means that the film displaying the seal is within the creative boundaries of reason and good judgment, and that the theatre showing this film supports the code. Occasionally, not often, you will see pictures wearing this sign. They will be pictures dealing with adult themes, and the sign is for the information of parents, so they'll know they must decide for themselves whether they want their children to see these particular films. So watch for this seal. It is both the promise and the symbol of a responsible motion picture industry.
And now, on with the show.
Okay, we're back, and we are talking Velvet Goldmine. Now, this is Bowie in the hands of a very capable filmmaker, Todd Haynes. And watching this, you can tell that he has a genuine love for this era, for this music, and for the man himself. Jeff, I have to apologize that, I know that you were not down with this first movie, and not being a Bowie fan, I kind of feel bad now for forcing you to watch these two movies.
For all in the name of the show, right? Listen, I'm sure I've forced you to watch some serious crap over the years. So I have never seen this. I've never seen Velvet Goldmine.
So not a lot of people have. Velvet Goldmine came out in 1998. Limited markets, I'm presuming. Now, the big star at the time in this movie was Ewan McGregor. He is first and foremost in the credits when the movie begins, even though he's probably got the least screen time out of the main three.
I was surprised to see
main four actors, if you include Toni Collette in there. But he's the big name, so he was the draw at the time. He was Obi-Wan. Everybody already knew that he was cast.
No, Obi-Wan. This was he was cast, right?
He was cast.
He went from this to go play Obi-Wan.
And I didn't see this movie. This didn't play locally until the same month that Phantom Menace opened. And I remember going up to Upstate Films in Rhinebeck with my buddy Rich, who worked at the bookstore with me, who was also a glam rock fan. And we had a couple of drinks at the adjoining bar beforehand, went into the movie and just loved it. From the Hard Day's Night opening of the Brian Eno song, Needle in the Camel's Eye, that you hear playing over the opening titles, we were in and invested in those day glow, those wonderful 70s style fonts that just roll in and out. You knew that you were in for a journey at just watching those credits unfold at the beginning of the movie. And with that soundtrack booming all around you in the theater, it was
I tell you, turn up the volume.
It was the perfect place to be to watch this movie at this particular time. And it was a crowded theater because I think not only were there Bowie fans there, but because you had your Ewan McGregor in it, you had your Christian Bale in it. It was a high profile kind of an indie picture at the time. So
I just want to say that Christian Bale is unbelievably lovely in this film. Like, his cheekbones have reached peak gorgeousness.
Yeah, my wife was like, "Wait, how old is this?" He looked very baby-faced.
Yes. So this is one of the things I was talking about before. I was primed for anything Bowie, even something unofficial like this. Now, there's controversy around this movie as well. When it was released, they tried and tried and tried to get the rights to 7 Bowie songs for this. Went to the man himself. Michael Stipe is a producer on this film, and Stipe himself lobbied Bowie several times on behalf of Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes sent Bowie copies of all of his films. Bowie loved them. He loved Safe, especially with Julianne Moore. And he had also done a movie called Superstar, which was all Barbie dolls.
Barbie dolls.
Yes. But it was the Karen Carpenter story with Barbie dolls.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little homage to that.
I was going to say, we get a little Barbie doll.
Velvet Goldmine.
Yeah.
And Bowie was actually, from all accounts that I've read, was actually torn at the time, whether or not to let them use his material. But there were 2 reasons why he didn't. 2 reasons that were actually put out there. One is that he was working on his own Ziggy Stardust movie at the time that would have been similar in scope to Velvet Goldmine, and he didn't want something that was competing. And this, of course, never came to be. The second thing is, which I think is more of the reason, is that he felt that if he gave the movie his songs, that people would take it as truth. And this was never meant to be that. This was a fictionalized version of Bowie. So the relationships that are portrayed in this movie may or may not have happened. And Bowie felt that if he gave them his music, people would think that this is what actually happened. So it is understandable that he didn't grant the film the rights to his songs. But I think at the same time, the movie is greater for it.
And it's sort of, like the Brian Slade character is like 90% Bowie with like a couple other people thrown in, and it's the same way where like Ewan McGregor's character, Kurt Wilde, is 95% Iggy Pop.
Iggy Pop, okay,
Yeah.
good.
And
See, I did kind of pick
With
up
a tiny bit of Lou Reed, that whole
Right.
backstory of the electroshock therapy is Lou Reed's backstory.
Right. But especially I thought this the first time I saw this, and I really thought it again this time, that somebody really fell down Ewan McGregor could have done a Kurt Cobain biopic.
Yes.
He looks
Yeah.
exactly
Well, I
like
think
him.
that
You know what's funny?
Courtney Love complained about this,
Yes,
right?
because Courtney Love was actually going to contribute a song to the soundtrack. And
Yep,
when
I
she
did read
saw the
that.
movie, she said, I can't. This is too
Yeah.
close to Kurt. Almost accusatory to Todd Haynes.
Which was not the intention, but
Yeah.
that was the way. And when you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Like,
know?
especially the scene where he's singing in the studio and he's wearing this sort of slouchy sweater and his hair is so blonde and it's
Yeah.
falling down straight in his face. He looks just like Kurt Cobain.
Yeah,
And I
right.
remember
Exactly like him.
there's a cover of Kurt Cobain on the NME or something where he's got the hair coming into his eyes and he's got heavily mascaraed eyes.
Hmm.
And Kurt Wilde is often in mascara in this movie. So yeah, and looking at the commentary on the Blu-ray, which is Todd Haynes actually says that Ewan McGregor told him, I'm warning you, I've been told that I look like Kurt Cobain when I have long hair. So I don't want this to take away from the movie. And Todd is just like, oh, don't worry about it. It's like not taking him seriously. And
Right,
then
until
when
he saw him, he's like,
show
son of a
up, yeah.
bitch.
So yeah, Bowie did not grant approval of his songs. And Todd Haynes obviously wanted the Bowie song Velvet Goldmine because this is what the movie is named after. And he also mentions in the commentary that he wanted the song All the Young Dudes and as kind of a theme that would go throughout the movie. And instead, the sections where they were going to use All the Young Dudes is used by 2HB, which is a Roxy Music song, which is such a beautiful song.
Yeah.
Such a longing. And I can't even picture All the Young Dudes being in those sections that 2HB is in now. This is just like a very sumptuous, there's so much here to chew on. Like I said, it's not a linear story at all. It flashes back, it flashes forward.
It's
to
all
different
over the
points in
place.
Bowie's life. And again, if you're a Bowie fan, they do try to hit on all those points, even though this is Brian Slade. This is not David Bowie. It's obvious that they're trying to accurately represent the various looks and phases of Bowie's career, both Ziggy and pre-Ziggy. And I always thought, and Haynes says as much, it's not about Bowie himself, but it's about a fan's perception of Ziggy and that whole crazy glam era. It's kind of maybe what your imagination made you think was going on behind closed doors during those times. And Todd Haynes, as a fan, was trying to impart that into this story, into like his joy of discovering all this stuff and thinking himself about maybe what these characters were like on and off stage.
And the really important thing too is this is not just about Kurt Wilde and Brian Slade. This is about Arthur Stewart. This is about Christian Bale's character sort of coming to realize who he is and how the music and everything that went around this period helped him realize, first of all, that he was gay and sort of be able to accept himself and present himself openly. And there's such a beautiful scene. It's fairly early on. This is where Christian Bale he does such good work. People always say he's a great actor, and even knowing he's a great actor, you can still have your breath taken away by stuff that he does. There's that scene very early on where he leaves his parents' house. He says, "Oh, I'm going out for a bit." And he goes outside and he takes off his jacket and he hides it outside, and he's walking down the street and he has this sort of, you can tell it's maybe one of the first times when he's sort of dressed as himself, right? He's wearing like this bright purple shirt and he has this look on his face, and he's such a mixture of, he's very proud, but he's also very vulnerable, because you can tell this is sort of the first time that he's done, and there's like this sweetness underneath, and he can do all of this in 3.5 seconds, with like one expression on his face, and you can feel that with him, this feeling of like, this is me, but I'm not like 100% sure yet, like if this is how I should be. And he's just amazing in this.
And I love the fact that the cool kids that he is trying to impress upon don't take him in right away.
No.
So
yeah, he
he's
gets
still
that look.
unsure, you know.
Yeah.
He's kind of awkwardly
He's like, accept
standing
me,
there.
please accept
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
And they're just
Yeah,
kind of
it's
giggling at him.
interesting. It is,
And
to me,
and
he was the core of this story.
I think every music fan goes through this, but the scene where he, in his imagination, when he sees Brian Slade for the first time on TV and he's jumping up and down, that's me. That's me. And then you realize he's not actually saying that, but he's sitting there watching, like rapt, while his parents are tut-tutting behind
I
him.
didn't know what was real or what was not real. So,
you know what's funny
that
is
out there.
Todd Haynes says that scene was inspired by something that Phil Collins said, that like the same thing happened to him. He watching the Beatles or whoever, like sitting there watching in the 60s with his parents po-faced behind him.
And like the primary female role is the Angela Bowie analog, which Mandy Slade, played by Toni Collette. And this is now, first of all, Toni Collette has more to chew on than Jenna Malone does, because the part is just written better to begin with. But Toni Collette does such a good job, I think, again, of sort of, she's another one of these incredibly subtle actresses who can show you this sort of combination of like, there's love and pride, and there's also like this teeny bit of ownership that you can see in her eyes when she sees Brian doing well.
Like a child, because
Yeah.
he is kind of like a blank slate child that she has to rear.
And she does such a good job of sort of portraying all the phases and all the complexities of that relationship, and kind of showing you maybe where things hurt her, but she was just pretending that it was fine. Or obviously, like the scene at the end when she brings in the divorce papers, you know, it's like the most vulnerable she's ever been in the film.
Right. And it's a reversal of roles from the previous film, because she is the victim here. He's not the one being put upon. He's doing it to her. And I think that she's the most likable character in the film, is Mandy, because the others are just kind of so wrapped up in their own things and in each other that Mandy is the kind of the guiding star here. Now, just to talk a little bit about Jonathan Rhys Meyers. This is one of the first roles that he did. Definitely one of his first where he is the star of the film. And I couldn't find this quote, but I remember an interviewer asking Bowie what he thought of Velvet Goldmine after it was released. And he said something to the effect, the actor who played me is very pretty, but he's kind of vacuous. But I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah, I think on purpose.
That he, just like in Stardust, although to a different degree, that this character is kind of allows things to happen to him during the course of the film. And he's absorbing, he's taking from here, he's taking from here. He's very much a chameleon that's trying to build his own personality. And I think that if it comes across that the character is kind of a void in the middle of all this hurricane, I think it's purposefully done. And I think that is what the character is supposed to be.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the one thing that he seems to want, and the one thing that he's fixated on besides stardom, is Kurt Wilde, you know. And it's interesting because you don't get the sense necessarily that Brian's in love with Kurt. It's almost like he wants to absorb him.
Yes, he wants to be him.
Yeah, he wants to like take that charisma and take that thing, that indefinable thing, and absorb it into himself and make himself some strange amalgamation of Kurt Wilde and Brian Slade. And again, I think I mentioned this last week, that I think Ewan McGregor's great in this. I've always admired the way he sort of throws himself very physically into roles, you know, and there's so much to Kurt, even in the way that he sits, you know, or like turns his head or whatever. There's like this whole life that he's conveying behind the mask of, like, you know, this really out there performer.
Very interesting. I found a recent interview with Jonathan Rhys Meyers, and he's saying that that Haynes told him to portray Brian Slade as not real. Obviously, it's a movie, so it's a character. But in the film itself, Slade is not supposed to be real, like Kurt Wilde is real, or Arthur is real, or Mandy is real. So he kind of admits there that he's playing it kind of as something that doesn't exist on its own without these other characters to bring him into being. So it's just, there's so much to chew on for the Bowie fan. A lot of the dialogue was taken directly from Bowie interviews, from himself and from contemporaries of the time. So if you are a Bowie fan, you know anything about this period, it's just like a goldmine of material to go through. It really is. And I loved it so much when I first saw it. Bought the soundtrack immediately. The music in this is just fantastic. There's a lot of Roxy music in here because he couldn't use Bowie, but they did get Iggy Pop's permission. And the music of Brian Eno and Brian Ferry and Roxy Music, they use that as a substitute for Bowie because there's many songs in here. Even the originals, Grant Lee Buffalo, the whole shebang, sounds like a Bowie song. The Ballad of Maxwell Demon sounds like it could be a Bowie song. So you could tell it was done by people with a lot of love for the material. And I really appreciated that and still do when I watch this. And we haven't talked about Eddie Izzard.
I know. I was just going to bring him
great.
up.
Yeah.
I was going to bring him up.
This is the first time he was ever in a movie. Can you believe it?
Really? This is his debut?
His debut. He was just a comedian at that
Yeah,
point.
he kills it.
Wait, Mystery Men hadn't come out at that point?
98.
I don't think so. Well,
90.
according to Todd Haynes, this was his first movie. So
They
maybe
may have. I think they came out the
before.
same year.
Because he's in Mystery Men.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge Eddie Izzard fan. We actually went to see him in concert last year. That was my son's 13th birthday present.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I love him. And he's so perfect in this. He's, that larger than life, character, almost a caricature.
But this he was playing a caricature. Tony DeFries was
Yeah.
the larger than life cigar chomping manager of Bowie that kind of took him to Ziggy Stardust Heights. And just the scene where he points and says, "I will make you a star." It's like he's a star himself. He's just made himself a star with that one line. He is completely convincing, and anybody would go with this guy, I think, and leave the other milquetoast manager behind. And he says, I will relinquish, sir, if you can pin me. And he puts his arm out.
Oh, I know. That was great.
Like over the top
what?
Sylvester Stallone, right?
Right.
And
Mystery Men was 99, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, so it was around the same time.
Yeah.
And we haven't really talked about the character of Jack Ferry yet,
Yeah.
who is important because he's not really based on one person, but he's just based on that idea that Bowie really took from other people to make himself what he was. So Todd Haynes says that the character of Jack Ferry was meant to represent all these people that were in that scene that were doing this kind of glittery makeup and really outre behavior first. So Jack Ferry represents those unsung people behind the scenes that never got credit for the huge influence that they eventually gave to Bowie. But yeah, and that's the whole thing that they tie in Oscar Wilde, that is brought down from space, because you always hear Oscar Wilde's name in a lot of stuff that talks about Bowie, like as kind of like an ancestor. And in this movie, he literally becomes an ancestor, dropping down that little pin, the green emerald, through the generations, which ends up with Jack Wilde. And very fittingly, Brian Slade steals it off of Jack Wilde, and then ends up in Arthur's beer at the end after Kurt slips it in.
Yeah.
What's funny is that the movie, you could tell that Miramax, which I kind of speak that name with a bad taste in my mouth these days.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to pronounce. They didn't know
Yeah.
how to promote it, because if you look at the poster and the trailer, they're trying to sell it as a murder mystery. Like, who shot
that's
Brian Slade?
Think about the way it's built. It's almost like Citizen Kane. You start with the depth of the character,
This is like a
and
rock
then it
and roll.
rolls back,
It is
and you just get
definitely-
these multiple flashbacks, and flashbacks to the point where early on I'm like, I don't know what point in time I'm actually watching this, but I think it still has the same structure.
That's like a wonderful kind of fever dream quality, especially because
Oh, that would be a good way to describe it.
it's not just like the flashbacks of the people Arthur's interviewing, right? Because first he interviews Slade's first manager, who tells a huge chunk of the story. It's actually a fairly big section.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
he tells
Yeah.
like a very big chunk of the story, and then he goes to interview Mandy and picks up, she picks up again
narrative,
a very large part of the story, which basically brings you up to like the last 20-25 minutes. But you also have throughout Arthur's memories and Arthur's flashbacks of various things that happened to him. And it's a scene where his father like tells him he's so ashamed of him. It's so heartbreaking. And it's doubly heartbreaking because he's on the bus leaving and his mother runs out.
Right, yes.
It's so sad. I think I brought this up during Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, that homosexuality had just been decriminalized in Britain only a few years before the 70s. I think, if I recall, 1968. But you were not supposed to basically have public displays of affection. Like, it was basically, it's not criminal, but you need to do that stuff inside. So so much of this is also, I think, about like the 70s is a huge coming out period in the US as well, especially with the disco era. Is trying to push, sort of this public acceptance of who people are. And in a lot of ways, I feel like this film is more relevant than ever. Don't you feel like you're seeing a lot of the same stuff again? Where we had this period of like, almost pushback, like this deep conservatism in the 80s and 90s. And now people are saying again, no, this is who I am, and you need to accept who I am because I too am a human. I am part of this society.
Yes, I do. And I think that that's one of the crimes, is that kind of history has taken this movie off the radar. And I don't really see why, because it is so closely tied to Bowie, judging from the way that it's not really available anymore. Hopefully it's something that's going to be rediscovered. Going off of that, another one of my favorite scenes, just as a music fan, is Arthur going through the record store at the beginning and the joy of finding that thing. And it's very akin to going in a comic book store, right? Walking through, looking at the books and finding that thing that you've got your eye on, that you want to take home. And I'm not sure if back then they didn't shrink wrap the thing, because all the records were in these plastic sleeves that he was able to take it out easily and look at it. And then kind of almost ashamedly, as if he's like buying a Playboy or something, go up to the counter and not showing his brother, I assume that's who he was, what he's buying.
Ridiculed him,
yeah, they're calling him a poofter and what else.
Right.
So he's ashamed to be buying this. And that's why he has to get out and find others like him. But that's also why he's kind of unwilling at the beginning to take on the assignment, because it's going to dredge up all these feelings and all these bad memories that are associated with it.
You mentioned the album though, but I think the production must have been a pure joy to recreate all album covers and to shoot the videos and some of that other stuff. Looked like it would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah. The whole crux of this is that Arthur is supposed to be investigating not only the disappearance of Brian Slade, but this is also in tandem with this concert by Tommy Stone, who is the new rock star. And it's so obviously based on Bowie during Let's Dance, the Tommy Stone character, because he's got the bleach blonde hair and he's got the suits and everything else. So literally, when Bowie ended Ziggy, they say that he killed Ziggy on stage at Hammersmith Odeon. They literally do it in the film where he's faking his own death and faking being shot. And in the film, the character disappears until Tommy Stone emerges, where, of course, we know that did not happen to Bowie. He came out with album after album after album. But in terms of this, I think what they're trying to do with the Ziggy Stardust era Bowie is kill Ziggy, and then he reemerges in the 80s
with a different face.
With a different face.
With a different face.
As an affront to everything that he stood for in the 70s, which is what a lot of Bowie fans said of the conservative Bowie of the 1980s. And one of the things that Jonathan Rhys-Meyers comments on is he fought to play the Tommy Stone part because he thinks that confuses a lot of people, that it's not him.
Right.
That it's not obviously
it was confusing.
him. But they do kind of hammer you over the head.
I get it, but it's still, the fact that it's not the same actor, you're just like... didn't know what the hell I was watching.
That's one of his
Three-quarters of the
regrets
time.
is that he didn't play
He
Tommy
didn't play him.
Stone. But he was only 19 when he did this. Jonathan
What?
Rhys-Meyers. He
Really?
was only 19 years old.
He's
And,
got nice bone structure.
I think Bale was 24, I think is what Haynes said.
Wow.
So all very young. McGregor's, he's probably the grandfather of this lot. I'm sure he was already pushing 30, if not over at this time. But yeah, Velvet Goldmine. Fever Dream, I think, is a good way to describe it. Yeah. I'm going to go, I think, 4 1/4 with Velvet Goldmine. I think it's very well done. It was very nice to revisit it. Thankfully, it was in 5.1, so I was able to blast it at home.
As it states at the beginning.
As it states at the beginning, which is also what it says on the Ziggy Stardust album, to be played at maximum volume. Yes.
I'm going to give this a 4. I haven't watched it since it came out, but I thought this was great then, and I still think it's great. And it definitely should be seen by more people.
Well, I saw it, and it was completely lost on me. I apologize, Jim. I know this is a cult classic. I know you love it and adore it. Yeah, Mrs. and I sat and we watched the whole thing. She didn't even fall asleep, so that gives it some credence. But it just, I don't know. It just didn't work for me. I didn't get it. I wasn't attached to the characters. I wasn't emotionally. I didn't think that any of them were likable, except for Ewan McGregor's character.
Not even Arthur?
I don't know. You see, you guys are sitting here and I almost feel like I need to watch it again now because you're talking it up and I'm like, did I even watch the same movie? Because
I mean, I think
I like Stardust better. I hate to say it by a point. I'm only giving it 2. Sorry.
Well, at least you watched it, Jeff.
I did watch it. Listen, I will never.
That's all I can ask.
You know what? It doesn't matter what you guys throw at me. I will never say no.
Right.
So I did, and listen, I gave it a shot. I really did. So it has its moments, and I think I like the fact that I watched Stardust first. So I think coming into this world with this might have been a little too much, not knowing what the hell I got going on. Right. So there you go. Sorry.
Oh, there is one funny story I forgot to tell about the commentary during Kurt Wild's Ewan McGregor's first performance that you see on screen when the Brian Slade character sees him for the first time. Todd Haynes asked him to moon the audience. Yeah. And so they did a take and nothing happened. And Todd Haynes went up to Ewan and said, why didn't you moon the audience? Oh, I forgot. I was too into it. I forgot completely to do it. Let's do it again. So they did the song again. And he said he not only mooned the audience, but he got even more into it than the last time and did what you see on screen. And he said he couldn't have even asked Ewan to do what he did.
Yeah, it was a little much.
But then he said, but apparently the rumors are true after.
But, I've seen a lot of Ewan McGregor movies, and guy is not shy about full frontal nudity.
No.
Is not.
Train spotting, yeah.
No. Neither full frontal nor full backwards nudity.
But that's what I say when I admire the way he sort of throws himself physically into roles. He just, whatever he has to do, you know what I mean? He does it.
And talking about this Kurt Weill part, of course, he is modeled primarily, as we said, on Iggy Pop, and he studied Iggy Pop. Iggy comes across to him as being a child on stage, and that's how he portrayed Kurt Weill, as a tantrumy child. So, and I think
that's pretty
he
funny.
nailed it. He nailed it completely.
I agree, because the first time I saw it, I was like, I feel like you feel for a second if you see him, Iggy Pop, like if you even seen a clip of him, like that's Iggy Pop. Like there's no doubt about who it is when he comes on stage. And again, like just going back to Stardust, where I said like I felt Johnny Flynn had no charisma. This movie is the opposite. Like where every character is loaded with charisma, and it's pouring off the screen.
And the competing charisma as well.
Yeah.
So all right. So there you have it, Velvet Goldmine. And so this brings us to our confessional this week.
Confessionals.
Being in line with the 2 films that we just watched, I thought that I would ask all of us what our favorite rock and roll movie is. Now, this could be a musical. It could be like a rock star as an actor, perhaps. It could be a biopic, like we saw here, a loosely based biopic, like we see in Velvet Goldmine. what is your favorite rock movie of all time? There's a number of them that I had to really juggle. Say, which one do I like the most? And it always goes back to which one can I watch over and over and over again. And I'm going to have to say Head by the Monkees.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
I've still never seen.
You've still never seen.
No.
Talk about your non-linear kind of a movie
really?
that's
Yeah.
all over the place. It's the Monkees really trying to, and with the help of Jack Nicholson, by the way, who appears in the film and co-wrote it with them, they really kind of try to destroy their television image and present themselves as completely manufactured. And over the course of 80 minutes, try to get you in on the joke that they are already aware of. And the music is great. It's very late 60s psychedelic kind of a soundtrack. And being a Monkees fan, I love it to this day. And as a runner-up, I'm going to have to give it to Depeche Mode 101, which is a concert film, but it also follows the exploits of a bunch of contest winners, teenagers that win a contest to follow Depeche Mode around on tour of the U.S. And so you're getting a juxtaposition of the band and who are really kind of boring old, married guys, and this crazy tour bus with the kids on it at the same time. Directed by D.A. Pennebaker. So Depeche Mode 101 is my runner-up.
You can go, Jeff.
I don't have as much of an emotional attachment to some of these rock and roll movies. I was going to say Trolls World Tour just to be a jerk. But, Moulin Rouge is a musical that is very much beloved in this family, if you want to bring up Ewan McGregor. But if you want to go rock and roll, The Commitments from 1991. I absolutely adore this movie. I love this movie. I had to buy the soundtrack as soon as I saw it. If anyone's not familiar, it's basically a bunch of kids in Ireland who start an R&B band and the trials and tribulations thereof. I think it's a fun movie. I really enjoy it, and I love the music. So that's my.
But you mentioned Moulin Rouge. I think that's very rock and roll, that movie.
Oh yeah. But to me, it's more a musical, as opposed to like The Commitments, where it's like it's a drama with rock sets.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Moulin Rouge because that's my number 2 choice.
There you go.
Moulin Rouge, because it uses so much existing music. There's only one original song in the film, and it uses them in such sort of dynamic and interesting
and
ways.
Unique and
And if you're out there and you've never seen it, please watch it. Like, you will never look at Roxanne the same way again. Amongst other
Rocket
things.
Man or some of the even.
Your Song, Ewan McGregor's Your Song is actually one of my favorite versions of that song.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's a great singer.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't bring up, which is these guys all did their own singing in
Velvet Goldmine.
Goldmine.
But so Moulin Rouge is my number 2. I really thought hard. I almost moved it into the number 1 spot. But when it comes down to it, I'm a Nick Cave fan, and I have to say that I think the best musical documentary I've ever seen is One More Time with Feeling. And if you've never seen it, this actually just came out a couple of years ago. It's incredibly moving. It's about Nick Cave. He was about to record Skeleton Tree, and as he's getting started with recording this album, his son Arthur died in a tragic accident. He fell from these cliffs in Brighton where they live, and he was only 15. And Nick Cave has talked about this in other interviews, and he talks about it in the film, how he had to drive from his house to the studio every day past the place where Arthur fell. And he had a friend who was this documentarian who came in he asked him to make the film because he didn't want to answer questions from the media. Basically, it was, this is my sort of one statement on this subject. And it's really, really beautiful. And in the end, it's a real tribute to his son. But it's also about making music and, But it's also about grief and sort of coming to grips with grief in like a really real way. If you've never seen it, it can be a hard watch, but it's really, really worth your time.
Yeah, I've never seen it because I'm kind of wary of just for
It's
those
hard.
reasons.
I was gonna say you're
I mean, they originally released it as a one night only event, and so it was like a concert. Like there was one time you could buy the tickets. And it was, of course, it was playing at the Music Box. So I bought the ticket, and I went down and I saw it. And for days after, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then even when I saw him in concert, when he toured for the Skeleton Tree, you could just tell that he was different. I'd seen him so many times, it was almost like he needed the crowd more than he ever had. I told my husband I'd never seen him that way, on stage. It seemed like he was really reaching out for that connection to the audience. That's very, very beautiful. It's a beautiful album if you've never heard it, and I really, really recommend. It's like I said, it's a tough watch, but it's totally worth your time.
Well, wait a second. This was our 150th episode.
What?
We didn't even mention it.
150.
What?
We're at 150.
Damn. Yes. That's a milestone right there, my friend.
I just have it written right small on my paper. I forgot to mention. Just like Ewan forgot to drop his trousers. I forgot to mention.
Please don't drop your trousers in celebration of the 150.
It just happens to be upon this David Bowie episode.
There you go.
Yes. So next week, we are doing our special Christmas episode.
Wow. This is a
Jeff,
long time.
Jeff, why don't you tell us what this is?
Wow. I've been talking about this since probably day one, and it has come up. It's come up on past when we did holiday specials. It is something I watch every year. And if you know where you were November 17th, 1978, you may realize I am speaking about the original one time only Star Wars holiday special, which aired on CBS and has subsequently been catapulted into the annals of lordom as being one of the worst things ever to have the Star Wars name branded upon it.
One of?
There's probably more. Yeah, there's probably
Lucas himself.
Lucas
has said that
if he could go and burn every copy, he would.
Yes, he would.
and yet, there are kids like me who, boy, you just couldn't wait to get in front of the TV. I didn't have to go to the theater to watch new Star Wars.
Oh yeah, I remember explicitly.
I did have to go to my grandmother's though, because we did not have CBS. We only had 2 channels at that point. And we will be pairing it up with the new Lego Star Wars holiday special, which is on Disney Plus.
There you have it. So that is our Christmas episode.
I can tell Christina's excited.
I'm super excited. I've never seen the Star Wars holiday special because I was only 4 years old in 1978.
That is true.
Now, have we set it up so Christina can watch it?
I believe we found it on YouTube. We found
Okay.
it on YouTube, did we not? Yes. Otherwise, it'll be very disappointing if you're not
if
scarred like the rest of us.
Never able to see it, that would be.
Hopefully, you're watching the version that has the commercials because I
think even mine, which I bought, I think through Intergalactic years ago on VHS, and I do have it on DVD now. I don't remember I don't think the commercials are in there. They're cut. Oh, maybe not, because there is a commercial for Tobor, which is basically just robot backwards.
So there you have it.
There you go. That's our holiday special next week.
Yeah.
So tune in.
Tune in. Come back.
Obviously, we're still doing Mandalorian standalone episodes as well. So listen to those. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
Shall I wrap that for you, sir?
Oh, that's all right. My saucer's just outside.
They come from miles to enjoy our intermission.